A quick introduction. My name's Kyle Thiem. I'm here with the National Weather Service office out of Peachtree City, Georgia. I'm a lead meteorologist there, and I'm also the fire weather program leader for our local office. And so real quick today, we're just going to talk a little bit about weather and how it really factors into prescribed burning and fire operations in general. We'll touch on a little bit about the National Weather Service. If you haven't heard of us or you haven't coordinated with us, we'll tell a little bit about who we are, what we do, and how we can help you guys in your operations. We'll also talk about weather and how it affects prescribed burning operations and some of the factors that we actually forecast for you guys to help manage your burns and plan ahead. We'll look at some tools that you can look at for prescribed burning operations and planning. We'll focus on stuff that we issue here from the National Weather Service, although there are a variety of tools I'm happy to talk to anybody about afterwards. And then we'll go on through the spot forecasts and some of the best practices for that. The best ways that you can get the best information out of us that we can, so we are getting you effective and efficient forecasts for your operations. So a little bit about the National Weather Service and who we are. So we have 122 weather forecast offices that actually cover the country. These are kind of our boots on the ground offices here in our local areas, just so that we're your local fresh face that you guys can coordinate with for anything that you guys need. But in addition to the weather forecast offices across the country, we also have 21 different center weather service units. Those focus on aviation across the country. Also 13 river forecast offices which focus on hydrology, river forecasting. There's also 9 different national centers for environmental prediction. Some of those include the Weather Prediction Center, which looks at big overall trends across the country for our weather patterns. They also forecast precipitation across the U.S. for better consistency from office to office. We also have the Storm Prediction Center. Anytime you get a severe thunderstorm or tornado watch alert, those are coming from the Storm Prediction Center. They also do a little bit of fire weather forecasting themselves as well. Things like the National Hurricane Prediction Center down in Miami, obviously predicting our tropical cyclones, and et cetera. But there are a bunch of different people across the Weather Service focusing on different aspects for operations, no matter what it is that you might need weather information for. Specifically for National Weather Service office here in Atlanta, we do cover 96 of Georgia's 159 counties. We're the only weather forecast office actually located physically in the state of Georgia. So if you guys are here in North Georgia, odds are we're the office to go to if you need information. National Weather Service office in Greenville, Spartanburg, South Carolina also does cover portions of North Georgia as well. We also have Morristown just to the north if you're just outside the state, or Columbia just off to the east. But all in all, we have 6 different offices that cover the state of Georgia, although we are far and beyond cover the most area out of all 6. So what we do, our mission is to provide you guys weather, hydrologic, and climate forecasts and warning for the protection of life and property, as well as the enhancement of the national economy. And that last little bit is weird, but when we're talking about prescribed burning operations, how much funding and how much resources go into those kind of operations? I imagine quite a bit. And so us providing you guys with the most accurate forecast information that we can helps you guys accomplish your mission as well, and that's really what we're here for. So if you look over on the right, those are just some snippets of all the different forecast areas that we focus on, going from drought, tropical, satellite, climate, aviation, anything you can name. But fire weather services are one of our bigger aspects. It's definitely the fastest growing aspect of what we do as an office. And we are proud of that, to be here to help you guys with your operations. So where do we factor in? So if we're looking at the fire behavior triangle, weather makes up, even though it's only one side of it, a little bit more than a third of when we're factoring in what affects fire behavior. So that's where your meteorologists come in, is to help determine what fire weather environmental conditions we're looking at, so that we can keep burns efficient, as well as keep people safe and keep fires manageable. So it's kind of like that Goldilocks paradox. We want good fire burning conditions, but we don't want too good fire burning conditions, because we don't want anything to get out of control. So we're here to help you find the best times of days, going on through a 7-day forecast or so, to try to find the best times where you guys can get through your operations. So a little look at some of the different parameters that we actually forecast for that relate to fire weather. You see we have a big long list there, and most of our general forecasting goes out about 7 days. That's our official forecasting time frame. specifically for some of those highlighted in red, which are more specific to fire weather forecasting, we typically go out around 3 days, or at the very least 2 operational periods if we need to. So if you need to look into the future a couple days and get a really good sense, you say you have a burn coming up, you really need to get some of the parameters to make sure that you can pull this off. 3 days is what we do for a lot of those fire-specific forecasts, but in general, we can look out 7 days and get a general sense of, hey, what are our temperatures doing? What's our humidity doing? Where are our winds going to be at? And even though things can change going from day 7 to day 1, we can at least start to get that planning process underway. So talking a bit about how weather factors into prescribed fires, there's really 2 big factors, at least for us as a forecast office, that we consider. So the first one is fire behavior and spread. Now these are mostly determined by weather parameters near the ground. And then there's also smoke dispersion, which is a really big aspect to it. And those are determined more by weather parameters above the ground. And so we have a pseudo-dense network of ground operational and observing platforms and weather stations that we can observe current weather conditions going on to help determine that fire behavior, fire spread. Smoke dispersion is a little bit harder. It's harder to measure what's going on up, 1,000 feet up in the air at any given time. So that gets a little bit harder. We'll get into some of those, how we do that a little bit. But we also want to focus on safety as well. That's another big factor we consider. Weather hazards also, they affect the well-being of outdoor personnel. So knowing if we have a heat advisory out, if we need to make sure that our frontline workers are being hydrated well enough. Looking at thunderstorm potential, we don't want anybody caught out in thunderstorms out on the front lines, and et cetera. Anything like that, we want to focus on weather hazards to make sure we're keeping people safe. All right, so looking at weather and fire behavior, that one aspect of that fire weather behavior triangle, it really boils down in a very simple way to 3 different things: how hot, how dry, and how windy. So when we're talking about heat, obviously surface temperature is a big aspect of that. And there's a lot of different factors that play into surface temperature and how we calculate those. But just know, at least when it comes to stability, that's the temperatures are one of the biggest factors in that. So knowing that increased temperatures increases stability, it also decreases our humidities, are good factors to know that help drive fire weather behavior. Moisture is another big aspect. Relative humidities, current rainfall, accumulations that we may have had recently or coming up, all those can factor into fire behavior. They have their biggest effect on fuel moistures, though, and depending on how fine our fuels are, the faster they respond to, let's say, some dry conditions. So our 1 hour fuels, all we need is a few hours of really dry conditions, and those respond like that, right? You can have thunderstorms in the morning, and if you're dry enough by the afternoon, those dry up super quick. Our 10-hour fuels usually take a few days, 100-hour fuels maybe a few weeks, and once we start getting into like more long-term drought type of conditions, those 1,000-hour fuels, usually a few months of weather conditions. I know they're experiencing a ton of that out in the West right now, having a lot of big problems because of it. And maybe the most influential factor are local winds for a variety of different reasons. They're the main driver of fire spread, both speed and direction, so knowing what our local winds are doing are critical. They also help provide oxygen. They push that flame front. Strong winds can cause spotting and crowning, helping manageable fires potentially get out of control. And higher winds also dry out fuels much more efficiently. On windy days, we get a lot more concern for hazardous fire weather behavior. All right, so that's looking at the ground, which you guys, I'm sure, are really well familiar with. But let's talk about, pivot and talk about more smoke dispersion and how we do some of our calculations for that. So smoke dispersion efficiency is determined by weather conditions above the ground. Again, that's a lot harder to measure. But we do have a couple tools at our disposal which we do that. So the first one are weather balloons. We usually have about 90 stations across the U.S. that launch weather balloons twice a day, every day, as long as there's no thunderstorms around. And so using these weather balloons, we can look at temperature and moisture as it increases with height, and that really helps us get a good feeling of what the vertical motion in the atmosphere is going to be doing, how stable we are. Looking at dry air aloft, is that dry air going to come down to the surface and really plummet our dew points and relative humidities by the afternoon? So we do that, and we can look at those different measurements using what we call a SKU-T diagram. Now, I'm not going to go into this a whole lot, because I went to school for way too long and spent way too much money trying to figure out what these graphs mean. And so I don't expect you guys to know this either, but these are just one of the tools that we use to help forecast those types of conditions for you guys. So just really briefly, atmospheric stability, it's the degree to which vertical motion in the atmosphere is either enhanced or suppressed. And when we're talking about smoke dispersion, we want that vertical motion in the atmosphere. And using that skew-T diagram I talked about just a second ago, we can actually determine where our stable and where our unstable layers in the atmosphere are currently existing. Now, usually these follow a pretty general pattern for us in the absence of any big weather system. So stable layers usually form in the morning near the ground. That's bad for smoke dispersion. We don't want stable layers. We want unstable layers, or at least neutrally stable layers, because that enables air to move up throughout the atmosphere and dispersion that smoke. So usually that happens on really warm, sunny afternoons, which we definitely get a lot of those, around these parts. So mixing heights also factor into that. It's a good measure of how unstable we are in the atmosphere because as air mixes with height, that mixing layer increases. So the mixing height there kind of determines how far up in the atmosphere that smoke dispersion is going to get. So days with mixing heights, they allow that plume to really travel vertically. At nighttime, those mixing heights usually cut off and get really low, only about a couple hundred feet, and that's why our smoke dispersions, you can almost time it if you're out there on a burn over a course of an hour. You see those smoke plumes go really high up in the atmosphere, and all of a sudden, you can't get anything much higher above the ground. So nighttime usually is very bad for that type of dispersion. We want those sunny, dry afternoons. And then transport winds. Transport winds are kind of the average wind speed and direction throughout the depth of that mixing layer. So it's not just the maximum winds between, let's say if our mixing heights are 5,000 feet, it's not just the maximum winds, it's the average of all the winds in that layer, because as we mix, all those winds distribute throughout that mixing layer. And so it really is critical to look at what the winds are doing at multiple heights to really factor into these kind of calculations. So. But they do determine how fast and in what direction those smoke plumes do travel. And we have a lot of different calculations for smoke dispersion that really factor into what our transport winds are. So generally, as our mixing heights grow with height, we get higher in the atmosphere. Usually, winds are stronger. So a lot of times, those different factors are correlated. Although beware high afternoon pressure patterns. If you guys ever watch like the local news and you see that big blue H coming right over your area, usually that's terrible for our transport winds because it's pushing those broader weather jet streams and flows away from our areas. And I've gotten so many calls, I've had to shut down a lot of burns and make Mike really unhappy on a lot of days where we get these beautiful conditions, mixing heights to 7,000 to 8,000 feet, and we just don't have the winds to really disperse that smoke column out. So those are the type of weather patterns that we look at. Usually we want a lot better flow kind of in the atmosphere. So really briefly talking about that smoke dispersion, we do actually calculate a couple different indices to help determine how well our smoke dispersion is going to be throughout any given day. So the two main ones that we focus on are ventilation rate, or also called the ventilation index. These are our mixing heights times transport winds. Very simple, nothing else to it, but it's looking at that smoke dispersion and saying, all right, how high can I stretch that smoke plume, and how horizontal can I stretch that smoke plume? And that dispersion really helps dampen those concentrations of smoke particulates to very safe levels if we have good ventilation rates. Atmospheric dispersion index is also a very popular one. It's very similar, except it's building in a stability component into it as well. So that one's also very popular. It's also very easy to understand because it goes on a scale from 0 to 100 generally. If we go past 100, usually it's indicating maybe some dangerous type of burning conditions out there. But just two different values categorized by different levels of poor, fair, good, awesome to determine what our smoke dispersion is really going to be throughout a given day. All right, so that's what we do. We do this every single day for you guys. But the more important information is how can you all access that information? Because if we're forecasting it and nobody's seeing it, then it's not doing anybody any good. And I've spent a lot of nights forecasting this stuff for you guys. So I want you guys to have this information. So we have a variety of different sites and ways and products to access this information, not just from the Weather Service, but we have a lot of partners that also have really good information. But at least in this talk, I've only got a limited amount of time, and I want to get you guys to lunch. So I'm going to focus on our National Weather Service products and pages that we can go to. So the first one, I was really pleased to see this highlighted in the last talk. This is the Fire Weather Dashboard. I know it's very popular amongst a lot of our partners, but I want to mention it because it is awesome. And if you haven't seen this before, it's definitely a note to take down. The URL is listed there, but what this does is it provides a point forecast directly from our forecast database to you, with a lot of different links and information on there, looking at general weather parameters out 7 days and fire weather specific parameters out 3 days. So what you can do here is you can go to this site, URL's at the top, and either you can enter in a location up towards the top, or you can go on the map, find your location, click a little point there, and you're gonna get a customized forecast straight for your area. You can zoom in on that map, change the domain so you can see the weather patterns that are coming in, look at radar, see what might be coming in for your area. You can bookmark it super easy. There's also links to a lot of our discussions on this page as well, which I'll talk about in a sec. But we also have a variety of different ways to interpret this information. So the first one, we present up a weekly summary right up top, and you can even download that straight to whatever computer you're using. And that's a really great first look at what temperatures, dew points, relative humidities, winds are gonna be out for at least 7 days, and fire weather specific parameters at least 3. So you can go there just to get a really quick glance, like, hey, I've got a free day on Wednesday. What is the weather gonna be doing for me? You can go here, bookmark that site. You can go back to it time and time again and really get a sense of what that information is gonna be and whether or not it's a good day to even plan for. They also have hourly tables. If you wanna get really into the weeds of what our forecast values are gonna be down to the hour at your location, you can go there. This goes out 7 days, and it has anything you'd ever want or need for fire weather environment information. So temperature, dew point, wind speeds, transport winds are even on there, the probability of precipitation. You can use these kind of sites even in your daily life if you want to. I use it every single day when I wake up, looking to see what the rain chances are going to be on a given day. But they also even calculate down ventilation rate and atmospheric dispersion index down to the hour if you need to know that for your location. What are the best hours for our smoke dispersion? Are we going to have storms coming in the afternoon? Great place to go to find out at least what the forecast is for that area. And then if you're like me, I'm a graphical interpreter. So for me to see these at the bottom, these hourly graphs about what the forecast is doing for the next 7 days is awesome. It's a really quick way to look in and glance. Looking at this, for instance, we can tell, our driest days are gonna be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, potentially. So if we're looking to burn, it might be towards the later end of this time scale. We can take a look at our relative humidities. Are we even gonna be dry enough? And then again, forecast parameters for fire-specific stuff like mixing heights, transport winds, ventilation rates. They'll go out usually 2 to 3 operational periods. So that is a great web page. We actually utilize that now. The GFC utilizes that information specifically for their permitting system, which is great. A really good one-stop shop. But we do still also have some more traditional products that could provide value in other ways as well. So the biggest one probably is the fire weather planning forecast. And we issue this at least twice a day, every day, unless we even need to change it. It's usually used for broad planning purposes and situational awareness, but the one big aspect of this one that I know a lot of our partners like is we actually sit down and we write a discussion for this forecast about general fire weather concerns throughout our entire forecast area each given day. So going out for at least a couple of days in our discussion. So if you have any questions or concerns, you can refer to this discussion. We may address what some of those might be. So looking at it a little bit more in depth here, we also provide, at least for 2 operational periods, we do look at the daytime aspects about what some of our specific values are going to be for these zones. So as I mentioned zones, let me tell you what those are. We break this product down into specific zones across our forecast area, and every Weather Service office does that. This one's just specific for our forecast area. So let's break this down. Let's look at Zone 3 here. This is Fannin, Union, and Towns counties. And what this product does is it looks at essentially the worst case scenario throughout that zone. And it breaks down, let's say we're looking at minimum relative humidities on this day. It's gonna look at Fannin, Union, and Towns County, find the worst case scenario out of that zone, and publish it to this product. So we like to use this because it's really good planning out multiple days ahead. All right, what's our worst case scenario that we have to plan for in order to make sure we can get this burn off right? So that's a big caveat, is that they're not average conditions for that zone. It's looking at that worst case conditions for each 12-hour period, going at least for the next 3 to 4 12-hour periods. And then after that, it actually goes in, and we do have a very broad general discussion, usually for days 3 through 7, just to get a sense of what's going to be happening out there. All right, so if you need something more specific than that for your forecast values, we also offer an area fire forecast matrix. Usually you can find this on any weather service fire weather specific site. So you go to your local weather service office page, go to their fire weather page. It should be easily found somewhere down on a menu, and this product should appear. And at least on ours, it's really easy because you can click whatever county you're in, and it's going to give you a forecast for that county. And it's going to break it down into 3-hour increments going at least 60 hours out, and then 6-hour increments after that. So if you really need to get down into the weeds about what time am I going to be experiencing relative humidities below 40%, this might be a good way to do that, to find out that for your area. There's no discussion with this product though, but it is more detailed, at least for a general area, around an area that you may be concerned about. If you need something even more specific than that, and you're not going to the fire weather dashboard, we also offer a fire weather point forecast matrix. Now we issue these forecasts for specific points. So these are not aerial forecasts looking at a broad zone or a broad county. These are specific points, and they're basically organized for our raw sites and our National Fire Danger Rating System sites. So if you are planning to burn, let's say near Camp Merrill, the raw site there, you're only a couple miles away, this might not be a bad product to get a really detailed solution of what's going to be occurring, or at least what we're predicting is going to be occurring at that location going out 7 days. And again, no discussion with this product, but it does give highly specific values if you need that. And then finally, we also issue spot forecasts for our bigger burns. The only caveat for that is we only issue these for federal, state, and local government agencies. So private landowners, we got to go through the GFC ticketing system. But if you guys are one of our local partners here, Forest Service utilizes this a lot, GFC, Fish and Wildlife, DNR sometimes, this is a great place to go for your either your go or your no-go decision. So a lot of different products for our planning purposes, but if you need that go, no-go decision or you need that documentation, this is a great place to go. So with what time I got left, I'm going to try just to really briefly go through some best practices for this. So these forecasts are issued usually for prescribed burning operations, wildfire management, hazardous material incidents, search and rescue, large public events. And any government agency can request one of these. And what happens is it sends a product straight to us, and we comb through your forecast to make sure it's accurate, and we give you a personalized discussion for what your concerns may be. So easy way to fill this out, step 1, your location. You can enter it in through a search bar if you have an address, if you have a lat long, great, or we have a great map. You can zoom into your location, click a point, it does everything for you. Step 2 is just figuring out what incident type you're trying to put in. So wildfire is selected by default, but it's important to pay attention to this because depending on what you select, your options will change on the next page. So if you need something fire specific, we've got to have a fire specific selection there. Or if it's used for some other incident, we can do that as well. It just has a little bit different options there. And then once we have that, we generate our spot forecast. We come to this page. Contact information is critical. We got to be able to get the information to you, and odds are if we have any questions, we're going to give you a call because we want to make sure that we're getting you the best information that we can. Everything else is kind of filled in automatically there. Burn details if you have them, if you're doing a burn, size, fuel type, sheltering. A lot of the times, especially if we have the time, we'll go through and see what area you're burning in. We'll look it up on Google Maps, Google Earth to try to figure out what kind of stand are you looking at? Is that going to affect the weather in that environment? And we try to personalize those forecasts for those areas. So those details are really important. And then finally, looking at what information you need. In general, it's just important to be as detailed in this as possible. We have a lot of times we'll get forecasts in that broad brush, give me everything all the time forever. And let me tell you, as somebody that has to issue these forecasts, a lot of times that's information overload. And so what we really want to get into is what forecast parameters do you need to do the job as efficiently as possible. So first comes first is deliver the forecast. When do you need it by? If you need it as soon as possible, that's going to be the default. Let's say we have a wildfire going on. Keep it where it is. If not, let us know when you need it by, because as soon as we get a spot forecast in, it stops our operations, at least for one of our forecasters to answer these. And if you don't need it right away, we want to know at least when you need it by, because we can plan that into our operations and make things more efficient for both you guys and us. Secondly, you can select which other weather elements that you need. So if you need everything, feel free to click that, but if there's some things that you don't need or don't want, the less you click off there, the less bogged down your forecast will get, and it makes it a lot easier for us to actually go through with a fine-tooth comb and really make sure we're giving you a good value. So for instance, in this case, if we select 1 hourly, which is also the default, and we select each 4 of these periods for 48 hours, and we select every single forecast parameter on there, there's 15. That's 720 data points that we have to go through as forecasters to make sure that it's accurate and efficient. And at that point, you can go to the fire weather dashboard and probably get the same information at that point. But if you comb this down a little bit, we trim that up a little bit, we can actually go through a lot more efficiently and cater the forecast for your area. And then finally on the right side here, there's a Noaa high split model. This is very similar to the V-smoke model that GFC puts out for their permitting system. If you need to know what the smoke dispersion is going to be doing, we can run that model. It'll send it automatically to your email. And then the most important part of this product is the remarks. It's the only way, if you don't call us at least, or we don't hear from you, it's the only way we know what your concerns might be or your thresholds might be. So this is a great way to put in there, hey, I'm concerned about 20-foot wind direction or the transport winds. I have a town that's just to my north by 3 miles. Is the smoke dispersion going to impact them? I need to know, is there going to be fog overnight? Let me know if that's a concern. This is the best place to go there. And if you put it in the remarks, we're going to try to hit it in the discussion. Most of the time, we don't ignore that. We want to help you guys with your concerns. So going through here, looking at, this is a spot forecast I did last night for today for this event. What do we need to know for this event if we were doing a burn right here, right now? So delivering it this morning so that we can plan is great. We're starting the forecast 10 a.m. And these are what I need to know. On Thursday, hey, I need a lot more information because this is when we're doing our burn. But overnight, going into the next day, I just need to know some general weather patterns so we can monitor, mop up, make sure everything's doused and everything's good. If you have, again, remarks on the side you need to know, let us know that because we're going to make sure that we look at those values specifically if you have concerns over your forecast area. So this is the best way to get it. And then finally at the bottom, there is a spot for observations if you have them. On-site observations are really what we're looking for. We have a good network of ground stations, whether it's National Weather Service stations, RAW stations. But if you have anything on site, that is invaluable because we can look at trends, we can adjust our forecasts accordingly, and that's really one of the best ways that we can tweak the forecast to get exactly what you need when you need it. And then finally, you submit it, we get a big banner coming up, and we try to get that forecast out to you as quickly as we can, or at least whenever it's due by. Usually we run those, if you schedule them out, usually we'll do them with every forecast package, which is either really early in the morning or sometime in the afternoon. And then finally, one last note so I can get you guys out of here. Communication with us. If you are needing weather information, communication with your local National Weather Service office, it's critical. We're here to help you guys as best we can. We're a bunch of weather nerds sitting behind computers looking at weather all day, but you guys are the ones actually doing the operations. And if we can help you guys out in any way, shape, or form, we want to do that. So knowing how you can communicate with your local weather service office is critical, especially if you're out in the field, have an idea. If the weather's going wrong, how are you going to get a hold of us? How can we help? Whether that's giving us a phone call, if you're out away from coverage, phoning it into your local dispatch so that we can coordinate with you guys to best help you all out. So we're also there for you 24/7. We don't leave. We don't sleep. We don't go home. I'm actually going in tonight. I'll be there until 7 a.m. If you guys need anything, you can contact me there if you're in our forecast area. So feel free to reach out, establish those partnerships, establish those relations, because we just want to help you guys get your operations as best you can. So just summarizing everything up here, when planning for a burn, that fire weather dashboard and that fire weather planning forecast where we actually write a discussion for you guys are some of your best resources for planning out at least a week ahead. Try to be precise if you can issue a spot forecast and you want to. Try to be as precise as possible with those because that really helps us. Sometimes when we get like a broad brush, it's just so much information that it's just impossible to go through. But if you really cater it down to what you need, it's a lot easier for us to really give you the most efficient and accurate forecast possible. So just keeping those things in mind helps us help you. And then developing a dialogue and relationship with your local NWS office. Even as a private landowner, you can call your local office and ask about what conditions might be. especially if you have a day in mind, just to get a general sense of what you're looking at. So feel free to establish those partnerships, those relations, because we are here to help you. So I know it's a little past noon, so I know it's lunchtime, but I will be around. I'm wearing the bright blue shirt. Come find me if you have any questions. I'm happy to help you guys out if you need it. So thank you.